Hello, students. Welcome to Pioneers of a New Poetry, American Literature 310. And this is week 8. This is the agenda for this week. We have poetry, definition, and authors. We will discuss two authors, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. And then we will discuss the learning engagement and the final exam. Let's decide what poetry is to understand its meaning and why we should pay attention to poetry. So poetry is considered an art form of emotions, meaning, and beauty. So in this case, language is used for its aesthetic qualities and notional and semantic content. Aesthetic qualities, the beauty in language. We use language to show beauty, to show images, in addition to the words themselves. And the beauty of the meaning, the beauty of those ideas and concepts expressed and conveyed in poetry. In addition, language is used in a manner to be felt by its audience to differ from ordinary prose. In other words, guys, you have to feel poetry. You have to connect to poetry. So poetry has three elements: emotions, meaning, and beauty. If you couldn't see any of those, then the work is not poetry. So it expresses emotions and it connects your emotions to the poem. It presents beautiful meaning, so you have to understand the meaning, and it presents beauty in the images it creates, in the description it creates, and in the use of words themselves and phrases. So you can connect to a poem, or you can apply it to your own society, or apply it to someone you know, or something you read about before. So it's about connection, it's about feelings. Then what's the difference between poetry and prose? I want you to take a look at the image on the right side, top and bottom. So on top, you can see a page full of prose. How do we know it's prose? From the shape, from outside, from the look, you can tell that this is prose because it looks like an essay where we have a long, full page. The only thing we have indentations at the beginning of paragraphs. So in prose, we have paragraphs and we have a full page. We don't break the line. Notice down, it's funny, but it's a good example. Roses are roses. Roses are roses. Logic is logical. I love you so plainly, and it's just tautological. So notice here, the verse is, the line is short. We break the line and we call it a turn. Then we turn to the following line. Every turn is important and it has a meaning. Why we turn here, not before, because it's a pause. You have to pause a little bit. So notice from the shape, from the look, from the outside look, you can tell this is poetry and the top is prose. Let's read the on the left side. Prose conveys meaning in a more expansive and less condensed way. So we have details, we write a lot of full pages, paragraphs, also frequently using more complete logical or narrative structures than poetry does. On the other side, poetry created from the need to escape the logical, as well as expressing feelings and other expressions in a tight, condensed manner. That doesn't mean poetry is illogical. It has logic. It has ideas and concepts and inventions. The whole idea here is poetry depends on emotions, depends on escaping sometimes reality and feeling it, escaping who you are and becoming someone else, imagining anything. So what's about poetry is it's very inventive and you can be whoever you want and express any feelings you want. Our first poet today is Walt Whitman. Why we're studying him? Because he's known for his free verse. It's a new writing, new kind of poetry. It's in between poetry and prose. And we're studying him because his poems are different. They are very long. So he's an American poet, educator, and editor known for free verse. Some of his works are The Expression of the Individual, Leaves of Grass, and I Hear America Singing. These are very long poems. So we said he's well known for free verse. What does it mean, free verse? It's a new type of art mixing poetry. In this case, it's close to prose. It sometimes has rhyming and metric verses, sometimes it doesn't. So not necessarily to be rhythmic. And let me share with you. So what's free verse poetry? So it has lines that don't rhyme. So what makes it different than prose? It looks like poetry. They break lines, irregular and short lines. So that's the only difference. Usually they use a lot of images and they repeat a lot, images, word constructions, phrase constructions, and ideas and concepts. For example, potato chips, crunchy, crispy, love, potato chips, yellow, bright, kindness, fill my belly, sweetness with your salty goodness. Notice here it rhymes, okay, and sometimes it doesn't. And let's go back. This is our first poem for Walt Whitman. I hear America singing. I hear America singing the varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be, blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck. The shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands. The woodcutter's song, the plowboy's on his way in the morning, or at noon intermission or at sundown. The delicious singing of the mother or of the young wife at work, or of the girl sewing or washing. Each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else. The day what belongs to the day, at night the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong melodious songs. Notice here it's discussing life in general. Everyone is celebrating America. Every one of these is building America. So when each one is singing his own or her own song, it means they're doing their job to build this country. Also is known for his Song of Myself. Is just a part of, if you remember, we discussed that he wrote Leaves of Grass. So Leaves of Grass is very, very long, and this is just part of it. It's a section of it called Song of Myself. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. This is just the introduction of it, and I hope you read it. Also, there's more into it. Let's put some of it. Let me stop the...
Celebrate myself and sing I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I now, 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools in abeyance, retiring back a while sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor for good or bad. I permit to speak at every hazard, nature without check, with original energy.
Let me stop it here. It has many sections, but we don't have time to view all of them. So please continue listening to this poem, and let's move to the following poet, Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson is very famous and very well known, and she is one of the pioneers. Let me stop it for a minute. So why we're studying Emily Dickinson? Because her poetry is totally different than the others, especially the people before her. She's considered one of America's greatest and most original poets. She challenged the existing definitions of poetry and the poet's works. She experimented with expression in order to free it from conventional restraints. And if you remember, before we studied authors like Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Walt Whitman, we just studied him. All of these people, all of these men wrote long poetry, complicated poetry, full of complex ideas and so forth. For her, she did something totally different. She wrote poetry in a simple, short way. Everyone can understand it without restrictions, without any rules. Sometimes her poetry rhyme, but you will see why we are studying her. For example, look at this poem. This is the whole poem, by the way. This is not an introduction. This is not a verse. This is the whole poem. It's called Faith is a Fine Invention by Emily Dickinson. Faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. Although it's very short, it's easy to understand, but the meaning is very deep. This poem is discussing the relation between science and religion and the conflict between both. So you will find people either believing in God, believing in some kind of faith, and depending on it, totally depending on it, or people who don't believe in anything and they believe in science only. But she's a moderate and she's trying to combine both of them. She's addressing faith as an invention. Notice the word here, invention. She didn't say that faith is something instinct and by God. She said invention. That means it was invented and humans invented. So we invented faith. However, this faith is very necessary when gentlemen can see. Gentlemen here referring to people, especially the people who feel themselves elite, like definitely she's talking about transcendentalists and who believed a lot in God and depended only on God in everything and refused to abide or listen to other rules on other nature. Also, the Puritans did the same. So she's saying faith is fine, faith is good, faith is necessary if you can see its benefits. And you gentlemen who don't believe in it, you have to see its benefits. But at the same time, notice the but. At the same time, microscopes are germs and anything. In fact, she's referring to science in general. It's just a symbol for discovering diseases, discovering new inventions in science and so forth. So she's referring to science as prudent. And in an emergency, you cannot depend on faith only. So if you are very, very sick and you're gonna die, your faith will not save you. It might save somebody or some rare cases, but in general, you need a doctor, you need medicine, you need science to treat you. So you have to need both. You have to address both. You have to consider both. And you have to understand the relation between them. These are two different ideas. Another poem, I'm Nobody, Who Are You? By Emily Dickinson. Let me put it for you.
I'm Nobody, Who Are You? By Emily Dickinson. I am nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us, joined down They'd advertise, how dreary to be somebody, how public like a frog, to tell one's name the livelong day, to an admiring bog.
So notice how simple and beautiful this poem is. She's saying, I'm nobody. Who are you? It means if you are nobody, it's a blessing, because if you are known, people will harass you, will know who you are, they will talk to you, they will bother you, they won't leave you alone. In this case, you can't live your life. So she's asking, are you nobody like me? I am nobody. She doesn't want to be famous. She doesn't want to be someone who is well known, because in this case you lose your privacy, you lose your life. And honestly, you can connect to this and you can see what's going on with celebrities. If you remember, Princess Diana died because of her well-known beauty and relation to the royal family in England. So that killed her and killed her boyfriend and led to a disaster. So sometimes it's bad to be someone famous. Another poem for her, Because I Couldn't Stop for Death. This is a longer version, but at the same time, very prudent and very deep in meaning. Let's skip the.
Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too. Past the school where children strove, he said, in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain, we passed the setting sun, or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering, chill, for only gossamer I can, I tippet only two. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, a cornice in the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horse's head, but toward eternity.
So did you notice the meaning here? She didn't stop for death, so death stopped for her. In this case, death will not leave you alone, and death will come to every human being. And sometimes death does not differentiate between young people and older people, even passes by schools, passes by nature, everything eventually dies. This is our last poem to discuss, and we will go over together the final exam study guide, and we'll review for it before the exam. The exam is going to be on Thursday at 10 a.m. Let's go to the learning engagement. And let's see this week, week 8. So I added the poems for you. It was more loose before, so I just defined it. You will choose one poem, either for Emily Dickinson's or Walt Whitman. Choose one of these poems. These are suggestions. You can choose anything from the book. There are more in the book if you want, your textbook. So only one poem, and you will discuss this poem. So choose the poem that most speak to you. Quote lines from the poem and include correct APA citation. Usually you put, I in fact gave you a sample, an example of a citation from the book, Levine 2017, page 88. This is how you, and you put quotation marks, this is how you cite a source. Author's last name, comma, year of publication, comma, page number. And you already have page numbers here unless you have it on a different page. For example, Emily Dickinson's on the same page because her poems are very short. However, Walt Whitman has very long poems, so you have to find the page number. So explain the poetry you chose, explain the meaning, and explain its relevance to you and today's life. That's for the learning engagement. I'm looking forward to reading it. And I will post also the guide for the exam. And please attend on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will review quickly for the main ideas in the exam, and we will take the exam together. So even if you are on site or online, even online students can take the exam with us or can choose any day posted by the university. Have a great day, and that's it for today.